Hello and welcome to the HealthTech Hour on UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio. My name is Steve Roost, and each week we bring you the best news, views and interviews with the CEOs, leaders and founders who are driving the health tech revolution in the UK and beyond. I am a CEO and founder of a health tech company myself, and I'm passionate about the people and companies who are changing the world. Before we get into the show, I want to handle a couple of bits of business. Firstly, I want to say a huge thank you to all of our listeners, as we've just found out that we're the fastest growing show ever on UK Health Radio, and we've had over 500,000 listeners since our launch 7 months ago. That's down to you guys listening. Thank you so much. Personally, I think we all know how passionate I am about bringing you the people and companies who are changing the world and driving the evolution of healthcare forward, and I'm pleased to see that you seem to like it as well. Finally, I want to just ask you also to follow us on the socials. So that's at UK Health Radio and at HealthTech Hour. So let's get straight into the show. So today we are talking to Kerstyn Comley and Suzi Godson, founders of social enterprise MeeToo, which is a safe, fully moderated peer support app for 11 to 25-year-olds available across the UK. MeeToo are an alumni of the NHS Digital Accelerator, like my company PogDoc. They have a huge number of partnerships with the NHS across the UK, and they've also undergone independent evaluation that has proved that MeeToo helps improve wellbeing. MeeToo has won a number of awards, and so it's a pleasure to welcome Kerstyn and Suzi to the show. Kerstyn, how are you?
Hi, very good, thanks, and lovely to be here.
Good. And Suzi, same to you. How are you?
Very good. Happy to be here too.
Good. Look at that. Excellent. Well, look, so I ask everyone this really, it's been a crazy 18 months. So how has it been for you guys at MeeToo and the team, and what's the kind of mood in the camp?
I think the mood in the camp is that we need a holiday. Desperate for that. It's been quite, I mean, look, ever since we started, you know, the project has dragged us along at high speed. But the last 18 months have been, you know, particularly fast moving, because we've been one of the few mental health and wellbeing support providers that was just immediately ready and up and running, available to support young people through the crisis. And so we saw our user numbers double over that period.
Wow.
You know, we're still quite a small organization, and we're still we're still in that sort of startup scale up phase. So it's been very exciting, but obviously it's also a huge amount of work and a huge amount of opportunity.
Cool. Go on, Suzi.
Ironically, when we set up, we set up our moderators to work from home. We thought that we could create a system whereby we employed people who had barriers to employment. They might be retired or disabled or carers, and that they'd be able to work from home and do all the moderation. And little did we know that within the space of about 48 months, the entire world would be working from home. But it did mean that we had this digital service that was ready to go, and so we were in position to keep delivering exactly the same level of support. So in terms of how we were supporting our young people, we weren't affected at all.
Great. Well, look, we can jump into all of that as we get through the show. So normally, as I think we went through in our kind of production call, the show's in 3 parts, which is more like an origins part of how you came to be doing all the great things that you're doing. Then the middle bit is about all of the great things that you're doing at MeeToo. And then the final bit is sort of more towards the future, what's next, and talking about some issues of the day. So when we have 2 people on, we just have to kind of, you know, make it work, because it's a little bit harder to do that. But we've done it before, so I'm sure it's going to be absolutely fine. So how did you both get involved in health tech? Because I'm not necessarily sure, based on the information that I saw, it's not necessarily, you've not been in it for forever, so to speak. There was a point at which you both got involved in it. So how did that happen?
So my background, actually, when I left university, I did mechanical engineering at university, and my first job was with Ford Motor Company, so very much not health tech. And although it was a fantastic job, I realized that actually I wanted to be working in the sort of the health and medical space. So God, don't even want to know how many, 25 years ago, at that point, I moved over into medical device design.
Okay.
So I've been working in the sort of health space for quite a long time, but I guess it's only been more recently, in the last maybe 8-9 years, that I've moved more into sort of health tech itself, and that's just a shift from sort of the shift from designing medical devices through to realizing that actually where my interests lie is within the data and the technology. So I've been doing this kind of stuff for quite a while now.
Okay. How about you, Suzi?
My background's kind of very different. I started out as a designer, so I was a graphic designer for a really long time, and then I switched to journalism. I've been writing at the sex and relationships column in the Times for 17 years now.
Okay.
And I trained as a psychologist, and so it's really a mix of psychology and design that sort of informed where we are now, because being able to understand the psychology and the psychological need and do that research and then design something that worked for young people, they were kind of specific skills. And so when you add in Kerstyn's skills in education technology, we sort of managed between the two of us to tick a lot of boxes in terms of creating a startup.
Okay. And how did you guys meet? What's the story?
Go ahead, Suzi.
I had the idea to do an app, and it was originally an app that was supposed to help young people. The idea was to help young people to ask really difficult questions around sex and relationships and sexuality and gender and all the things that I was experiencing in my work. But I didn't have any skills in the tech building area. But I have a kid who at that time went to trampolining, and there was this other mum at the trampolining class, and I knew she had a PhD from Cambridge and was really super bright and worked in that space. So I basically stalked her until she had a look at my idea, and she really loved it, and that was how we met. And it was pretty random, but
over Charles trampolining. That's a good story. It's a good founder story. But out of interest, I just want to pick up on one thing that you mentioned there in your column in the Times. Had you were you seeing kind of an uptick in issues coming from younger readers, or were you seeing some trends that made you think that this was where you wanted to do it, that this app or this service would be valuable?
Absolutely. I've always had contact with younger people because I'm easy to get hold of. So I've always had kind of correspondence from them. And in my day job, I'm not really allowed to answer to that. They're not the Times audience. So those questions never got published. And so I felt a sort of moral obligation to create something that would create a safe space. It's very, very difficult for young people to get access to that kind of information safely. So it was definitely driven by a desire to sort of answer their questions in a safe way.
Okay. And were there some themes that their questions were around that? Because MeeToo isn't just sexuality focused or anything, it's wide open, isn't it?
No. So what
themes?
Well, what happened was we built a pilot, very rudimentary pilot, which we piloted in 3 schools with 16-year-old students. And what happened was we saw immediately, what Kerstyn will tell you about the technical things that we learned, but from a content perspective, what we learned was that the kid who was worried about coming out was also being bullied, was also coming from parents who were homophobic, was also struggling with an eating disorder. So it's really, really complex and multi-layered. And so we came away and realized that we had to build something that was more like a life support system for kids, where they could talk about anything, because these issues are dynamic and they change over time. They don't stay the same. The issues a 13-year-old is dealing with are different to the issues a 16-year-old is dealing with. And so it became this kind of, we call it mental help, but it's actually just a support system for young people as they grow up.
Kerstyn, when you first heard about this idea at the trampolining club, or wherever it was subsequently, what were your initial reactions?
Oh, I was just incredibly excited about it, because I I was sort of coming to the end of a quite intense project where I co-founded a free school, and I still work there as a governor. So I was very involved in the lives of the target audience. You know, it's a secondary school. You know, acutely aware on the governance side of things, you know, of the safeguarding issues, of the challenges that young people face, and then with my other sort of hat on and already being interested in health tech and ed tech and having done some projects in those areas, it just seemed like such an immediately obvious solution to a really tricky problem that has been around forever. So I just jumped straight into it.
Okay, so it wasn't. Yeah, it seems like a pretty good fit from the beginning. On that point around, you know, that there was a problem that has been around for ages. How would you kind of define the needs or issues amongst what became your user group that you are solving, or I guess actually more when you started, what did you perceive the issues to be? Because I imagine they may well have evolved over the period of time, but when you started, what were the key things that you thought you needed to solve?
Well, I think as Suzi's described originally, we thought that the main problem was that young people found it very difficult to get information and guidance for those tricky or embarrassing areas of life. So, you know, sex and relationships being, you know, absolutely classic example of that. But when we went into these schools, as Suzi's explained, actually we found that there was a much bigger problem around well-being and mental health generally. And at the same time, that was just about a year before the Heads Together campaign that was run by the Princes and the Royal Foundation. So we sort of rode this wave of increased awareness about the importance of mental health and well-being. And there was a huge amount of work being done at the time to increase the numbers of conversations and reduce stigma, but there were almost no solutions.
Okay.
So collectively, society was encouraging people to be more open about their mental health, but there were no solutions or support, or very minimal support services to actually address the things that people were talking about.
Right.
And so right from that early stage, we sort of realized actually we wanted to be part of that solution.
Okay. So I was going to ask, you know, at the time where you started, what were the options for young people who wanted to talk about something that was difficult or awkward or sensitive?
Well, there was social media, obviously, but social media is not a great way to find out. You know, first of all, it wasn't anonymous, so you know, there's a lot of fronting on social media. If you go onto the web, there's masses and masses of information. But we did a fantastic experiment with a school where we got a bunch of students and we gave them a problem to solve, and it was one of the problems that had come up in the app, or several problems, and we set them in front of a computer and asked them to come up with solutions to that problem by searching online. And what is immediately apparent from that experiment is that problems are personal, problems are local, and problems are multi-layered. And when you ask somebody to sit in front of a computer and solve a problem like that, they come across generic information that explains things at a kind of broad level. But you can't personalize that. You can't make that specific to the individual. And so what we've managed to achieve with MeeToo and through the peer support model and the pre-moderated guidance is that, you know, you're normalizing issues for young people. So you're immediately creating a space where they're not the only one with that problem, and the other person that had that problem is willing to share their advice and guidance on how they got through it. And so it's a much more collaborative way of solving problems. And we did know, you know, if you take it back to the sex and relationship stuff, one of the big issues with all of that is that people pretend that they're doing things that they're not doing, or they pretend that they know things that they don't know. And when you create this anonymous space where people are actually telling the truth, you sort of stick a pin in the balloon and everyone goes, oh, okay, you're not doing that either, then I'm not weird. Okay. And so that was a big part of it.
And when you first started it, how much discussion did you have around, you know, anonymous, not anonymous? user generated, not user generated? Like how did you puzzle all of those different things?
We were really clear from the beginning. I mean, we did a lot of research. We spent the first, we didn't even know each other. So we spent the first year getting to know each other, and also going and talking to young people and talking to parents. We did a massive amount of user research, but we knew from the outside that it had to be anonymous and it had to be pre-moderated. I mean, it was very clear to us straight away, because you can see how without moderation, certainly social media becomes a race to the bottom. And without anonymity, people wouldn't be honest. So those criteria were in place from day one.
Okay.
I mean, there was also some really good research that had been done over in Australia at Melbourne University. So we based quite a lot of our early work on those academic trials, they were interested in this question of how could you put peer support into a digital context. So obviously we've gone a lot further than that now, but that also gave us a good steer right at the beginning.
Okay. And how based on what was otherwise available, or the kind of standard doctrine of peer support, how revolutionary was it to say, okay, completely anonymous and pre-moderated? I mean, I'm not quite sure what the baseline is that would be compared against, if that makes any sense.
We did a massive kind of literature review of all the sort of academic work on face-to-face peer support and digital peer support, and we built the app around best practice.
Okay.
But we sort of took it one step further, because we also realized that we needed things like a limited character count, because when you compare what we're doing to a chat room, for example, like Reddit, or where conversations can spin out into other conversations, or there's no word count, that people go down tunnels. And part of our process was to try and get the users to really focus on what the issue was, because we knew that young people had a limited attention span. So we needed them to get to the point quickly, both with the problem and with the advice that they were being given. So we designed it really based on sort of adding social media values into a best practice peer support platform. Okay. And that works incredibly well, mainly because it's quick.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So we're going to do a quick stop now for a commercial break, but after that, we're going to come back and talk to both of you about all of the great stuff that MeeToo is doing right now, and really get under the hood of how it works. So we'll be right back in a second. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We're talking to Suzi and Kerstyn from MeeToo, which is the fully moderated peer support app for 11 to 25-year-olds. So before the break, we were just talking, we just got onto exactly how MeeToo works. So before we get onto that, I just want to just ask something, because I think, as far as I know, you're a social enterprise. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
I think it would be really helpful for me, but also for everyone listening, is if you could just explain what that means, because I think it's thrown around quite a lot, and people might have come across the term without necessarily understanding what it means.
Sure. So when we started out, the ambitions for what we were trying to do were entirely altruistic. We found a problem, we felt we had a solution, and that was our real driver, was just to solve it. And so, in the nearly 6 years that we've been going, we've refined that thinking into, how do we sustain this for the long term? And we could have gone, and we looked very carefully at going down the charity route. All of our activities meet those sort of charitable criteria, but we're really interested in this sustainability piece. Mm-hmm. And also, the other difficulty with the charity model is that you are ultimately always having to fundraise for donations.
Okay.
And unfortunately, in the mental health space, along with many other charity spaces, the way to get people to give up their money is to describe that really negative story, the desperate child, things like that. Whereas what we wanted to do was to create a space that was incredibly positive. And so we decided that the best solution was actually to be a social enterprise. So what this means is that we are set up as a regular company, limited by shares, but into our articles, our constitution, we have a number of locks. So our mission is locked. So the mission to improve the lives and mental health and well-being of young people is locked into that mission. And so too is the requirement for us to reinvest the majority of any profit we make back into the mission. So it's a kind of halfway house between a full for profit and a charity. Everything meets that charitable condition, but we have the opportunity to raise investment, and obviously with a tech product, it's really difficult. You need to raise quite a lot of investment, and that's very hard for small unknown charities. So as a tech product, we've got much more opportunities of social investment. So that's, yes, it sort of sits in the middle, and we think that this is really the best way that we can be sustainable and have the most impact over the long term.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think and have you found that being a social enterprise as opposed to a pure for-profit entity, has that been attractive to the people and organizations that you hope to represent and hope to work with?
Absolutely, because I don't think anybody wants to make money out of somebody else's misery. So yeah, absolutely.
It means we have to be quite careful about who invests in us, though, because we need to always put impact first. And so, that's not going to suit a lot of venture capitalists who are looking for a quick exit.
Yeah, but thankfully there are more and more sustainable, ethical, impact-oriented venture capitalist funds, or let's call them investment funds, because I think venture capitalist has a slight stigma attached to the term. But, investors, funds who are interested in this space, I would think, particularly over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it's growing. Yeah, it's a growing space.
Good. Well, so why, out of interest, did you start focusing on 11 to 25-year-olds? I think we've kind of covered it, but I'm interested in that specific age range and how you got there.
So originally, when we first set out, we were the 13 to 18-year-olds, the classic definition of a teenager. But very quickly, we started getting requests from schools and the NHS to go down in age, mainly so that we could cover whole secondary schools in one go. It was hard for us to say only year up can use MeeToo. We chose not to go below 11 because in our research, we found that children under the age of 11 don't really benefit as much from peer support. They're still very much being directed by adults in their lives. They don't have the language skills necessary to engage in a kind of digital peer space. And then at the other end, well, if you've got a 17, 18-year-old who's been actively using MeeToo and then they go off to university and they still want to use MeeToo, we're not going to say no.
Yeah, you're fine now. I'm so sorry. Off you go.
Yeah, organically, the demand just crept up. And in fact, although we say we focus on 11 to 25-year-olds, that we're already getting people in their 30s and even an occasional 40-year-old coming on. So we know that there's demand for older people. And in February we launched a new app called MeeToo Connect, which is aimed specifically at people working in the education sector. So the model that we've created and the technology that we're building is applicable to basically anybody aged 11 and above.
Okay.
It's quite important to add that the app is age banded. So within the app, a 13-year-old will only see posts from 11 to 15, so 2 years either side of their age group, and then that age band grows up with them as they move up through the app.
That makes sense. So let's take that opportunity. Could you just explain to everyone at home, how does MeeToo work? What would the user journey be like, and how would a user kind of come across it in the first place, or could come across it?
So we mainly do social media marketing, but we're in about, I think, 300 schools are promoting the app as well. But we're quite skilled at getting to young people via social media. And then they would download the app and register. And when they register, they shake their phone and a random username is generated from 3 different words, and so that username is very specific to MeeToo, so they can't use it in any other social media.
Right.
And and we've taken out all the visual hierarchies, which is really important. There's completely gender neutral, and that is really important because we're very, very focused on including boys. Boys are just left out of the mental health space. They won't go there by themselves, and you have to actively design things to engage boys.
Okay.
And we are really pleased that 40% of our user base is boys. It's very, very unusual.
Right.
And then it's a kind of a Twitter style feed where it's short posts, short replies. We have content within the app, which educational content or things that are happening. And then over lockdown, we built in a phenomenal directory, which has got everything from crisis helplines and support groups to the best apps and TED Talks and books and things to do. And all of that can be filtered by topic. So if a young person has got anxiety, they can filter everything around anxiety. If they've got autism, they can filter around autism. If they're coming out, they can filter around that. So all of the topics they can filter their feed, or they can filter their directory. And everything is pre-moderated. So every post and reply is checked by a human, and before it goes live, and risk assessed, and anything high risk is dealt with by a small team of counselors rather than going through to the feed.
Okay. So if I come on and are you encouraged to post something first, or encouraged to look around, or what
we definitely have lots of lurkers, people who use the app, but they use the app to read other people's post and reply. So they may be suffering from anxiety, but they won't post themselves, but they will learn from reading other people's posts, or they can use the directory. But most of our, we have about 6,000 active users per month. We have about 51,000 registered users, but say 6,000 people at a time posting and replying.
Okay. And how does it work from a school's perspective? And I know that you work with Chelsea and Westminster Hospital and a whole number of other NHS institutions. How does it sort of work from that perspective? Are they, because you sort of work with the school and they promote it to their pupils and things? How does that sort of play out?
So we've got two layers. So we've got anybody, any school, any organisation is very welcome to promote the app. The app is free at the point of use. Any young person can find it on the App Store and download it, or the Play Store, download it and start using it. And so we have most of our schools that we've been working with do just that, and they get in touch with us. We can send them little cards to promote the app, or posters or whatever. So immediately that school or the youth group or whoever it is has a service that they can offer to their young people to give those young people more support. But the next level up from that is that actually all the data that we get from the app it's got an incredible amount of insights. So as Suzi describes, when the posts come in, they get categorized and they get risk assessed. And we can use that in an anonymized, aggregated form to tell people about what's happening at a national level, at a local level, or even at an organizational level for their young people. And so that's a different service. We call it MeeToo Insights, that we've been piloting in Somerset with Somerset CCG and Warwickshire Local Authority, and it's also being used by about 34 schools across the country now. And what's really fantastic, actually, because this is another kind of thing that's come out of lockdown, really. What's really great is that, say, for a school, it's giving them real insight into what's going on for their students so that they can target their interventions more effectively. Okay. So rather than just doing a bullying course because that's what they feel they ought to do, they can see, actually, no, at the moment, we've got a problem with our 11 to 13-year-olds around self-harm. So let's run some self-harm training or informational workshops. So it's allowing those schools to be much more focused and obviously ultimately save money as well, because they're not just spending money randomly. So it's the data that drives that opportunity.
I think that's super interesting. So how were schools and these other organizations, how are they working? How were they, or are they in other places, working out what content to deliver to young people at any given time?
It's incredibly hard. I mean, you know, if as a comparison, so schools are really good at using data to understand the progress of a child's learning, and that's been accelerating for about the last five to 8 years. You know, school pour over charts of, you know, and we have pinpointing what they have to do to improve a child's learning. There is almost no way, except for maybe a survey once or twice a year, to really get detailed information about the mental health of the whole school environment. And so what you find is that in many schools, they either have sort of a knee-jerk reaction to a major event, often, unfortunately, you know, it's something like a suicide or a near suicide, or they're simply focusing on what's, you know, the latest trend within media, or, you know, perhaps one individual's, you know, what something that's shown them. I mean, the other problem that we've got is that there is virtually no training for frontline staff, so that your biology teacher or your learning support system. We did a survey back in October that found that most staff have less than 1 hour of training around mental health and well-being a year. But of course, the frontline staff are the staff who build the rapport and the relationship with the student. And so if you've got that, you know, UNIS 9 student who's really struggling, they're more likely to go to the teacher they really, you know, have trust in than going to the pastoral team. But it's only the pastoral team with the training. So this MeeToo Insights facility allows the whole school to be much more informed about what's going on in the school and be better able to support their students.
Yeah, it's like a mental health dashboard for the school.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that that sounds great. And I'm guessing the fact that it's anonymous in the beginning makes it easier to provide that data, right? Because you know, everyone is anonymous by definition, so there's much lower risk of any kind of, you know, sensitivity or issue around data sharing and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very different way of looking at things, because most methods of evaluation are based on self-report. So if I ask you how you're doing, you'll probably tell me that you're fine. You're unlikely to share your kind of deepest, innermost concerns and anxieties. What our data comes from is the exact opposite. It's from in the moment, I'm feeling this right now, my distress level is X. It's the unfiltered insight into how young people are genuinely feeling. That data is not collectible unless you do it in this way. You will not get that.
Yeah, I completely agree. You can't get it another way.
Yeah.
You can't ask people, because like you say, they're not going to tell you the truth, or well, I don't know, they might feel awkward. Depends on who's asking, depends in what context.
Exactly.
If I write something down, will someone see it and they'll laugh at me or whatever?
Yeah.
You know? I completely agree with you.
And that's,
sorry, go on.
it just means that the data is so powerful. I can't even express how mind-blowing it is to see this data. It's a game changer.
And can you without betraying any confidences or anything like that, could you give an example of an insight that came out of the data that otherwise would have gone completely unmissed, or would have got completely missed?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's dynamic, but at the moment we're looking at the fact that self-harm in 11 to 13-year-olds is so stratospherically higher than it is in other age groups. And that's, you know, that was a shock to me. I didn't realize that. And of course, that sends us on a mission to research that and to understand why that is happening, and that we're now looking at sort of, you know, neurological change in adolescence that explains that cycle. But we can also see that it's dynamic, and it decreases quite dramatically over the following kind of 5 or 6 years. Insights like that you can only see when you have a volume of data with that population. You know, it's amazing. Yeah,
that is amazing. So effectively, you've created, with MeeToo, you've created an environment where people feel someone's excited.
I'm so sorry.
So, where you've created a platform whereby young people feel comfortable sharing that information, and by sharing that information, it helps improve the support that they can be given, Because otherwise no one knows that data because it's just in someone's head. So you need to get it out of their head, but in an environment that they're comfortable sharing it within.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I was just going to say, so we've been doing this year-long pilot in Somerset with Somerset CCG, and that's interesting because that's at a more sort of population level than in a school. There were schools involved, and it's been really successful. I mean, it's exceeded our expectations really in terms of the level of the take-up and engagement, but then also the quality of the information that we can give back to the CCG as well, and it's going to be enabling them to help them plan the services and the support that they need to be commissioning over the next few years. So yeah, it's both at that local level and more at the population level.
Okay. Well, look, we're going to do another short break, but after that, I want to come back and pick up on that CCG thing as opposed to it being different to how you work in a school. So we will be back in 1 minute. Hi, and we are back for the final part of our show with the founders of MeeToo. So just before the commercial break, we were talking about CCG. Now, CCG, for those of you who aren't familiar with NHS acronyms, is a clinical commissioning group. Effectively, they are the groups across the whole country. They used to kind of be called NHS trusts. They're now called CCGs. They might be moving to something else called an integrated care system. And so the cycle continues of renaming things. But effectively, within a given area, they're responsible for allocating budgets for healthcare initiatives in that area. So you were saying that you were working with Somerset CCG. How is that different to when you work with a school in terms of where your users are, if that makes sense? Because I understand when you work with a school, it's the pupils. But when you're working with, the trust or the area's commissioning group, how does that play out to where your MeeToo is available?
So MeeToo is available everywhere for everyone.
Okay.
So when we work with a school, we will do work to try to specifically engage the students from that school. But once they're in MeeToo, they are connecting with everybody else who's in MeeToo. There's no separate kind of groups or anything like that. And so very similarly, when we've been working with our work with Somerset, we were looking at a sort of geographical area for our promotional work. So we are working with schools within Somerset as well, but we're also, in addition to the stuff we're doing in the schools, we're also doing stuff on social media and other ways to target young people within a geographical area. But as I say, they all come in, they're all supporting each other. And what's lovely is it means that child in Somerset who feels that they are the only one who has a particular problem because their friendship group doesn't have that problem, they're connecting with a child in Leeds through that same problem, and suddenly that capacity, I think that's what's so exciting about the model, is it's infinitely scalable. Yeah. And that's one of the things actually that the NHS has really picked up on, is that whereas many of the other models, like the one-to-one counselling model, are limited by the number of staff that are available. Yeah,
so hugely unscalable.
Absolutely, yeah. So even if they had the budget to go and employ all these people, those counsellors just don't exist. Whereas with the peer support model, every new user is a new person to give support. So it just keeps growing. So that's wonderful. Karen.
I was going to say, for the CCG, obviously the benefit is that they're getting data on the whole population, and in precisely the same way that a school can target resources dependent on what the data is telling them. The CCG can do the same thing, but it also gets really valuable feedback on existing services, because obviously the young people in Somerset discuss what is available in Somerset, or what they're using, or what their waiting times are. And that kind of first-hand feedback and insights is also hugely valuable to the CCG.
Yeah, and also because sending out questionnaires to people is never particularly successful, even at the best of times. And I suspect that sending out questionnaires to young people would be particularly unsuccessful. Again, I'm not an expert, so you might tell me I'm completely barking up the wrong tree. But I don't know. I could see that sort of, let's find out how our mental health initiatives in young people are going based on survey data would not be particularly easy.
Yeah. Well, you get the unvarnished truth, which is hard to get.
Yeah, the other thing that we offer with an NHS trust or a local authority is, so in the directory area, the organisation, whether it's a school or it's in Somerset's case the CCG, they can actually add in local information that they want to promote. So we're very much a gateway to all the other support in the area. We're like the front door. And what's really lovely about that is that, so that young person is having a conversation about an issue with other peers, and the peers then say, go check in the directory. And it's a much more effective way of getting young people to access the support that they need. And of course, so then they go off and, so for Somerset, for example, in the Somerset information portal, they're promoting Mindline, they're promoting Young Somerset. So now that young person goes into Young Somerset, benefits from the services that they offer, which might be a 6-week counselling program, and they finish that, and yet they've still got the support of MeeToo. So MeeToo is the kind of universal service. They're available all the time, anytime. And then we've got these sort of partnerships with these more specialist providers for those moments when that young person needs a higher level of intervention. And that's just works really effectively as well from an early intervention focus.
I want to pick up on a couple of things that you mentioned earlier, because I know that when we've had other mental health services and businesses on, there's always questions that we get from listeners after the fact around, I guess some of the things that listeners put up more in actually ahead of the show are more like, how does the safeguarding bit work? You alluded to it earlier, Suzi, which is if someone has a particularly severe issue or concerning issue, the pre-moderation helps pass them on to someone. So what's your kind of risk management sort of processes and things like that within the system?
Well, I mean, the whole app was built with safeguarding at its core. So, we were always going to be dealing with this high risk population of young people. So everything has been set up to put safeguarding first. So when a post comes in, if it's every post is risk assessed, and levels 1 to 3 will go through to the feed, but levels 4 and 5 do not go through. They go to the counsellors. The minute it goes into quarantine, a counsellor is alerted, so they're straight on it, and they can communicate directly with the young person, and they will then help them to make a decision about what next steps are available to them, what they feel comfortable with, and they will help them then to access that support. But it's we never want to go down the one-to-one counselling route. We have a kind of crisis triage team. We never set up to be a crisis support service, but inevitably we do get a lot of kids in crisis, and so we've had to get better and better at supporting them effectively.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Another question, which I know is a sensitive one, is around age verification. So I understand that your age banding thing makes total sense to me, i.e., based on the age of that person, they can only see a limited range of content that's slightly older than them or slightly younger than them, and that moves up. Totally makes sense. How do you kind of go through that age verification process to make sure you don't get, bad actors or irresponsible people coming onto the platform and pretending to be something that they're not?
It doesn't actually matter because everything is checked. Everything is checked before it goes live. I mean, all the content, all the resources, and everything that we put out there are, appropriate for everyone. Or where they're very specific, maybe a sexual health one, it would be very clear. This is aimed at this age group.
Okay.
And would be openly available on the web anyway. But the point about the moderation means that if somebody comes on and they are actually aged 50, but they pretend to be 13, and they start posting or replying, so long as the quality of what they're posting or replying is high and good and appropriate, that's fine, it's safe. And obviously what we would worry about would be grooming, but because it's fully anonymous, nobody can share personal information. So if somebody comes on, and what you do see, unfortunately, with people who are trying to groom vulnerable people, is that they want to encourage that young person to move to a less safe environment. But if they come on, and we do see it from time to time, and say, hey, this is my Snapchat handle, come follow me over there, well, that doesn't go through to the feed, that's screened out. So in the very early stage, we didn't have an age banding, and so we built the system to be safe without that. It's just that we know that the age banding really helps make the conversations relevant to the ages
Yeah.
of the people that are talking to each other.
That makes sense. And so if I, I'm, believe it or not, I am over 18. If I went on or not, do I see content that's been sort of rated for over 18s, or I can only interact or receive replies and so on and so forth for people over 18, for example?
Yes, that's right. Yes. So once you hit 18, you see posts from everybody who is over 18. That at the moment, that's all in there together. If you're under 18, then you'll only be seeing posts from people who are plus or minus 2 years in age from you.
Yeah, I can completely see why that pre-moderation solves a lot of the issues that other platforms have. I totally see that.
And there are claims out there that machine learning and things are now good enough to automatically moderate. Actually, we have yet to find anything that is really capable. So we do use machine learning to assist the moderators and make it much more efficient and quick and easy. But ultimately, context is everything. So it's really important that a human sees that post.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to, the fact that you're a social enterprise and embedded in your constitution is the sort of requirement to do the best that you can and provide the best service for the need that you're servicing. And so, whereas if you were for profit, then the I guess the driving mentality might be around scale and profitability and things like that, at which point there's a trade-off, right? Algorithms are cheaper than humans, but you also might lose posts that should go up that get unfairly taken down for whatever reason, or worse, posts that should go up that shouldn't go up. Whereas with a human only model, that's really quite unlikely to happen, I would suspect.
Yeah, and it also means that we've created a really amazing community. And I mean, in a way, it's an artificial community because it's artificially nice, because everybody who's in there is really super helpful and really altruistic. And when we set it up, we were pretty sure people would post their problems, but we weren't sure how to generate replies. But actually, altruism is such a driver. And I mean, we did know from the peer support research that helping helps the helper as much as it helps the helped.
Yeah.
But we see that in action all the time, is that when you help somebody and you use your own difficult life experience to advise somebody else, so you turn something that was negative for you into something positive by using it as advice and support for somebody else, when that person comes back to you and says, gosh, thank you, that really helped, I really appreciate that, that reward is a real driver for people to help more. It's amazing as a cycle. It really works.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of evidence out there that says that if that by doing something nice for somebody else is a way to move yourself out of a depressive state. It's not to say it's the only solution or anything, but there's definitely evidence that says, along with exercise and things like that, by doing something nice, that also releases dopamine or increased dopamine and gives you a happy feeling about that and gives you more control. A lot of anxiety is related to lack of agency, right? Whereas actually by doing something nice for someone, you're certainly taking control of that situation. So I can completely understand that. Now, we only have a few minutes left in the show. And I know that one of the things we spoke about at length in our production meeting was how important evidence is for you and for MeeToo. And I know that you've done some phenomenal things about proving the value of MeeToo, which very few, if any, of the other kind of mental health platforms have done. So do you want to explain to everyone a little bit about what you've done there?
Yes. So we are very excited about this. So we have been funded for the past 9 months by Innovate UK to have an independent evaluation of MeeToo, and we work with the digital evaluation unit at the Anna Freud Centre, and they ran a project to look to see the impact of MeeToo on the mental health of young people. So there were 10 schools involved, so lots of young people and also people using the app, and they ran a really rigorous study looking at change over time for 2 different time points through a collection of both surveys and interviews. So we've got all of that kind of quantitative data, and then we've also backed it up by a whole lot of qualitative data. So it's really nice to have that those 2 aspects. Now I'm going to get the findings all wrong, so Suzi, you've memorized it. You go ahead.
Well, so they found lots and lots of things, but the key thing for us is that they found statistically significant evidence of improved well-being, increased confidence, increased connectedness, and better knowledge and skills around managing own mental health. And if we think about what we set out to achieve when we made this app, I'd say that pretty much sums up what our aspiration was in a nutshell. So for us to have, that box ticked, we can say that we can definitively that MeeToo works and that MeeToo helps young people. And as you said, I don't know any other apps that have that kind of impact data around them. There will be surveys that say kids like anonymity or kids like community or they like aspects, but to have evidence of change and that change mechanism being peer support is super exciting.
Yeah, I think it's huge. And I mean, for everyone listening, Innovate UK, which provided the funding, is effectively the premier R&D funding institution in the UK. So the fact that you managed to secure that funding from them, I think speaks volumes, as well as the fact that you're one of the few, if the only mental health app in the UK with that independent evaluation. So yeah, I think that's fantastic. So in the last couple of minutes of the show, what's next for MeeToo over the next 12 to 24 months? What's kind of on the docket, so to speak?
I think the biggest area is looking at these young people who are really in crisis. As Suzi said earlier, they're coming to us. We can't avoid it. Although we were looking to support the early intervention space, actually, we now believe, and particularly with this great finding from the Anna Freud Centre, we believe that we can really do it as much to revolutionize the support we can give to young people in crisis as we have to bring peer support to the digital space. So we're out there looking for funding to be able to do that. We've got a great partnership with Bristol University and University of Sussex. So I think, that's the space to watch for us, is for us to transform the response to extreme self-harm, eating disorders and suicide.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a big job. How is that being done right now by services, for example? Is it
badly, I would say?
Okay.
For young people, the CAMS waiting lists are, legendary. And apart from that, you've got some telephone helplines which provide one-off support. But what we can do is we can provide both crisis support and ongoing support. And that's what we've done. Our partners in Bristol have done an awful lot of research around how young people who are suicidal use online services or support, and we will work with the research, and we have built a solution that we think would be a state-of-the-art, absolute game changer for young people. So we're just raising the funding for that now.
Okay, cool. And that would roll out alongside the other services on your platform?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Well, look, it seems like you've got quite a lot going on, which, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? That's all very exciting, but it's dealing with such a serious, somber topic. Do you find that sometimes difficult to manage, in a sense?
No, because we're helping, and because we can see the difference that we make. And we know that so many people are afraid of this space. But we are, it's not that we're risk takers. It's just we know we've worked in this space for a long time. We know how to manage it really safely, and we know how to help. And we get so much gratitude from our users, from the people that we've helped. We had 91 suicides where an overdose, etc., had been taken, and we managed to save those lives. And the economic case for that, the economic case for a single completed youth suicide is £9.7 million to society.
Wow.
So, we're making a difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely clear. And I think that's probably a good point to end on. So thank you both, Suzi and Kerstyn, for coming on, founders of MeeToo, which is available everywhere on the App Store and Play Store for 11 to 25-year-olds or slightly older, in my case. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for everyone for listening. And we wish you all the best with MeeToo. It sounds like the next 12 to 24 months are going to be very exciting for you, and you're doing something that's extremely valuable.
Thank you.
Thanks.